know, I saw it.
Because courts will not settle. Because they issue making mortgages.
Yeah, they could make things bonds, yeah.
I'm serious. Right. There's no way.
All I heard is like, oh god.
4 hours.
Yo,
I'm not okay. For the lyrics, I see. Come on.
he's awesome.
I play down here. Yeah, I said happy hour. Could come for a beer. I hate you. I hate all of you.
Got it?
I feel it. It's okay. Look.
The share holders, the IPO,
So that means that sales value.
I'll just wait for the
And that you're smart.
Well, you decide.
Now I can't go back one.
I already saw it. You did it right. I don't know why you did it down.
Because I knew I couldn't do quiz 5, and if I turn that in, I have to take the exam anyway because I ran out of time. I couldn't go back through and finish it and take it. So, and I knew that was hard. That's the only reason I knew. So, the side of the spot. So, I knew.
I mean, when he did it, I felt stupid because I'm like, I was like, I agree. I totally
Pretty fair, man. Sorry. Sorry. Oven's broken.
Do you have a good wall?
And I was like, see,
I thought about it this week. I went to a luncheon and there was an attorney talking about it.
I really when he did it, I was like, oh, that's it.
The law firm is LAW.
I heard it and I was like, 20 minutes. I'm like,
Yes. 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 It was a lady with a, and they were talking about all the, how it's federal law and you break it if you're going to set. That was very helpful. Very helpful. Yeah, that would be helpful. It wasn't.
These are I don't know I lost some balance. I'm gonna buy
My first semester. They all had like 0-0 right. All your students are from
Wait, you're in case to an August already? I didn't start. Is it hard to get started or not? Well, I don't know when the time is. The cases you just go with them. You need to do the cases. That'd be great. It's just
missing, you know, certain I'm just like, I'm
That's never good.
Yes, that's what
that's fine here.
All right. Give a welcome to Como.
You shouldn't clap in advance. You haven't heard my act yet. You haven't clap after the fact.
Jesus.
Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? I've made some notes. You know, it seems to me that Dr. Forgy and others here give you all the technical aspects of real estate and real estate investing. So I think I'll just dispense with all that and try to talk a little bit about the practical side of it. Now, I preface all this by saying I'm more of a real estate investor as opposed to a developer. I work with developers. You know, actually I'm getting a little older, so I work with people who will do a lot of the work that I don't have to do. And so a lot of what I say is predicated on the fact that I happen to have some capital. And so a lot of real estate investment is a lot easier if you got some capital. If you don't have capital, there's no secret, magic bullet for getting it. But somehow or other you got to find some capital. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the practical aspects of things. I think real estate, like all businesses, are largely, real estate is largely common sense. I just saw you. Oh, you have to listen to some of this again. Oh my goodness. So anyhow, a lot of real estate, like all businesses, common sense. I mean, let's be truthful. It really is common sense. There's nothing magical about any of this. problem is a lot of people don't have a hell of a lot of common sense. And as a result, they don't do very well in real estate, they don't do very well in a lot of other, if they try to handle a lot of other businesses. It's hard for me to quite understand that, but that's, I think, just the way it is. Some people don't have a lot of common sense. I also think that, like all businesses, real estate also is all about people. No matter what, in any business, in my view, you know, I'm 71 years old. I've been in business myself since I was just turned 21. And if there's one thing I learned, it's all about people. Now that doesn't exclude hard work. Hard work is fundamental, period. If you're not willing to work hard, well, that's a problem. But assuming you are, the most important ingredient is people. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And the corollary to that is that, in my view, people trump ideas. What I mean by that is, you know, I'm going to say all this stuff, and I'm not going to put, in my opinion, in front of everything because it'll just take too long. But obviously, this is just my opinion, and I probably am dead wrong on some stuff. But my gut tells me I'm right on a lot of it, if not all of it. And I think people trump ideas every day of the week, and that means you can take a great idea and put it in a half-baked idea, let's say, and put it in the hands of a lazy, I don't know, stupid, but a lazy bonehead, and they'll screw it up every time. You take a fully baked idea and put it in the hands of somebody who's smart, willing to work hard, and is focused. They'll take a half-baked idea and kind of figure out how to bake it the rest of the way and make it into something. In my view, people always trump ideas. In real estate in particular, but in business in general, I think in many cases the battle is won or lost up front when the deal is made. And what I mean by that is, I don't know how many of you play golf, but you know, I play golf with my buddies once in a while. I really don't like the game very much, but you know, it's a silly game. But it's fun to get out there with the guys and, you know, shoot the breeze and play golf. And so we negotiate handicaps up front. That's the beauty of golf. A lousy golfer can play with a good golfer with a handicap, you know, something to equalize. Well, you know, 9 times out of 10, if you've got a $5 bet on the game, 9 times out of 10, the golf game is won right up front when you're negotiating the handicaps, you know? And I think the same goes in real estate and most business, but real estate in particular. The way the deal is structured and the work and the effort and the ingenuity used up front, that's where the game oftentimes is won or lost. Let me see. Let me state in general that I believe in the real estate business in South Florida for a lot of reasons. I think, you know, with our climate, our lack of a corporate income tax, a hospitable business environment, a friendly tax environment in particular, makes this a terrific place in terms of the real estate business. I think, you know, let's face it, when we have growth, we typically have appreciation in real estate. People come down here, they got to live somewhere, they got to work somewhere, they got to eat somewhere, they got to buy their clothes somewhere. And usually that means that real estate prices over a period of time tend to go up. Now, I don't know if I can use my arm.
No, actually, right over there on the beside the lectern, there's some markers.
Oh, yeah, I get to be a teacher. So, you know, over the course of years, I don't know what years, but over the long haul, real estate prices have done that, right? But they do this they do this along the way, right? They go up and down, and then you know, several years ago, they went way down, and now maybe they're back up to about there again. And this, of course, was when we had the Great Recession. So now there's no assurance that this is going to continue into the future. You know, only time will tell. But I believe it will. The problem is, you don't know when these are coming and going. You don't know how deep they're going to be. And if you're overly leveraged, meaning you got a lot of debt and you've got an income producing property and that tenant goes belly up on you and you've got mortgage payments to pay and you're down here and you can't find somebody else to pay the rent, you could lose that property. So what this tells you is that if you don't get yourself overly leveraged, which therefore means you need more capital, where do you get the capital? I don't know. That's a question I can't answer. That's a hard one. Sorry. That one's tougher to answer. But if you don't overly leverage yourself, you don't get too much in debt so that you can withstand these ups and downs, I believe that this trajectory in some form, I don't know, it's going to be a rocket ship to the moon like this, but some trajectory, some upward trajectory, I think, is, in my view, likely. And that's one of the beauties of real estate, is that over time, even if you make a mistake or two, that time helps bail you out. Okay, so as I said, I'm a real estate investor more than I am a developer. I've done some development and I've partnered with others, but I think Dr. Forgy passed out my bio of sorts. You know, I made a little bit of money in another business, and when I retired from that, in effect, I needed something to do because I got bored pretty quick. So real estate, I'd always been interested in real estate. When I went away to college, I wanted to be an architect. I love architecture and I love different styles of architecture. So I wanted to be an architect. And so I always had an interest in buildings and real estate, and so it seemed like a logical thing for me to do. And even earlier on, I bought a few things here and there, but I hadn't done much. I was focused on my other business where I hoped someday I would make some money. So that's how I got into the real estate business, is after I sold my interest in my other company. It seemed like the thing to do. So there are really two, this isn't rocket science either, there's two basic ways that I do my real estate activities. One, very straightforward one, is I look for something that might be a good deal and I buy it. If I can, usually income producing things. So, I own some properties on Las Olas, and I own a bunch of stuff. And hopefully we have tenants in there who continue paying their rent, and over a period of time those rents tend to increase and the value of those properties tends, not always, but tends to increase. So I do some of that. And I tried, which I think for younger folks, I think having a goal, which what I did, even when I was younger working at my other company, I tried to, every year or two, I set a goal of myself to scrape up some money and try and buy something. Because I believed in the long-term value of real estate as a way of making myself some money. And I think that kind of objective is a wise one. Put some specificity to that. In other words, I'm going to buy this kind of property this often and try to live by that. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I buy stuff for my own account, and I have a few people in my office, and we keep track of the rents, and we beat up on the tenants when they don't pay, and we're nice to them when they do, and that's pretty straightforward. The other way I invest, usually in much bigger projects, is I partner with developers to to build, you know, big buildings. And I was partner for many years with the guy whose name's on the door here, Terry Stiles. He and I were partners for many years, till unfortunately he died a couple of years ago. But I still work with his company. His son has taken over, and I still work with them. And I was partners with them in just maybe everything, just about everything that they did in downtown Fort Lauderdale, and some other stuff in Nashville and North Carolina and some other places. So so one of the other things I do is I'll team up with somebody like Stiles, and they raise money for the equity they need for these projects. Many years ago, believe it or not, prior to the previous recession, before this big one, banks used to lend developers, many times they'd lend them 100% of the money they needed to build a building, and even 2 or 3 years worth of the interest that they'd have to pay while the building is being built. So that these developers had no skin in the game, and if things worked, they'd make a fortune. If things didn't work, they'd say so long and turn the keys over to the bank. The banks learned a few lessons when a recession came, and a lot of developers did just that and walked away, and they ended up owning a ton of real estate that they had to then somehow liquidate at bargain prices, and they lost a fortune. These days, they'll loan you, of course, as I'm sure you've learned, they loan you part of the money, and you have to come up with the equity for the rest. And so I've worked with Stiles and the Horvitz family, in particular, and the Horvitz and Hudson family, in addition to Stiles. We've built a bunch of buildings downtown together, and so I've invested with them as a limited partner. So I don't know if you've learned these, have you been talking about some of these structures? Okay. So for many years, we did a lot of projects together where I was a limited partner with in Stiles and others too, but I'll just focus on Stiles because it's local. So I was a limited partner, meaning that I gave them money, and so I get on the train, and then someday when you get off the train, they tell you if you made how you're doing, you know, how you did. You know, I really didn't get too much involved, but I was a limited partner with them. Now in recent days, because these projects have gotten so much bigger downtown, I mean, we built the buildings downtown where, if you know where Lobster Bar is, and anyway, they were, I forget how far, they were maybe, I don't know, 12 floors, something like that. Those were huge projects at the time, and the people I just mentioned, me and the others, we could come up with the equity that we needed between us to fund those developments. Today, those buildings are 40 stories tall, and Stiles is doing one now in which I'm a participant, called The Main, which is a, I don't know, it's roughly 40, I forget now exactly, roughly a 40-story office building on Las Olas, and then behind it a roughly same size 40-story rental apartment building. $350 million project. The numbers have gotten so huge that Stiles is now required to have skin in the game. They're required to put up a big chunk of money themselves, and it's so much money that now I invest with them on the general partner side, on the developer's side. And so I'm doing 2 big projects with them actually downtown now. That one I just described, and there's another rental apartment complex on the New River that we're doing together. So I'm actually partnering with them on the general partner side, which brings with it a whole lot of complexity, because the general partner, as opposed to the limited partners, the general partner takes on liability, certain kinds of liability, and then they had to bring in a big institutional investor to put up a lot of the equity money, because roughly $125 million in equity money had to be put up, and that was a little bit more than the 3 traditional partners could do. So the projects have gotten bigger, And so I've had to kind of morph and participate on the general partner side. And that, as I said, has added a lot of complexity so that the legal work that has to be done to protect me from the kind of liability that I could incur is a lot more complex. And I got to tell you, it's been very challenging doing that. It's made me pay a lot of attention that otherwise I, had gotten to be somewhat formulaic, But going back to one thing I missed, going back to when I buy a property for my own account, and many times it has a tenant in it. So kind of the things that I think, again, are common sense, but what are the kinds of things I look for? And what are the kinds of things I'm worried about? I want to know how strong that tenant is. If it's a mom and pop restaurant going in there, the likelihood of their survival is far less than if it's Panera, let's say, or something like that. It will also impact price. Obviously, the most important thing I look at is location. I mean, you've heard this location 100 times. But it really is true. When this recession hit, and these ups and downs, it is amazing how quickly they happen. I hate to jump around, but I'm thinking about stuff. It's amazing how quickly these things happen. It's like right now, people have stars in their eyes. It's been a rocket ship in terms of, interest rates have been very low, so financing is readily available, and prices have gone up. And there are many people who think that's just going to last forever, especially people who are younger and haven't been through a few of these. Those of us that have know that you can be here and you just think this is going to go on forever, but it doesn't. And when it turns, in my view, it turns so quickly. So quickly. You go to sleep one night and everything's great. You wake up the next morning and all hell's broken loose and everybody wants to sell. They want to buy, they all want to sell. And the same thing happens at the bottom. Maybe not quite as quickly, but still relatively quickly. All of a sudden, I don't know what happens. It's some perceptions, whatever it is. People wake up and all of a sudden they start getting interested again. Maybe prices get to a level where it's a bargain. I don't know. I can't tell you what it is. I just know it happens. So, of course, location is very important, and location is important for all the reasons that make sense that I'm sure you've talked about, but also just make common sense. But when one of these things happen, the great locations are the last ones to turn and the first ones to come back. So in addition to generating, in my view, in addition to generating higher rents because the location's so great, I think there's added value because of that in risk reduction. Because again, you want to live through these downturns so that you take advantage of these upturns. And I believe these downturns and upturns are a little bit shorter on the really great properties. Now, I can't tell you I have, proof of that I can, I can show you. I don't know. I've just been around so long that that is my, I've come to believe that. So whether it's true or not, I think it is, but I don't know for sure. So location is everything. What's the strength of the tenant? That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? And then if the tenant defaults, what's that? What is that building a single purpose building? Is it so specialized that you can't use it for anything? My old company years ago, I bought the building that we were in out on Cypress Creek, and I leased it to the company. It was 72,000 square feet. The company moved, so I had a vacant building, and I had a vacant building that was designed and built for our company. In those days, that's all I thought about, the company. And so the company's gone. All of a sudden, I've got a single tenant building. It didn't have enough stairways for a multi-tenant, rental building. So I had a 72,000 square building. It wasn't a white elephant, but it was a, it had limited potential because you had to have one big user, and there are not that many of them around. Fortunately, a single user did come along and buy it, thank God. But you know, those kinds of things, or is it a dental office or a medical office or something, you know, if this tenant goes out, I don't care how good they are, sometimes they go out, do you have alternatives? Obviously the length of the lease, how long is it, how long do they have left, does the rent escalate, how quickly does it escalate, how likely is the appreciation in, you know, in that area. And then there's a matter of guarantees. Many leases, you know, have a personal guarantee in those leases. And in my experience, personal guarantees are largely worthless. They're good for harassment value. If you got a jerk who's your tenant, you know, and a lot of times we put these good guy guarantees in. I don't know if you've talked about those, but if let's say somebody's business just fails. We've got a restaurant. I own some restaurant buildings. The restaurant fails. You know, it's not good for anybody. They're going to go there. We're going to go our separate ways. Now, what's he going to do about it? Is he going to steal all the equipment and everything and rip and strip the place in the middle of the night? Or is he or she going to act like a gentle person and come look you in the eye and say, we're not making it, here's the keys back, and I'll release you from all further liability on the lease? That's what you really want, and sometimes the tenant is a jerk, and you know, their business fails, and then they want to steal everything that isn't theirs and leave you with a big mess on their hands. And sometimes a personal guarantee can be used as a bit of a hammer to keep them from doing that. But as far as collecting on personal guarantees so that they pay when their company can't, unless that personal guarantor is Wayne Huizinga, you're probably not gonna collect. So those are some of the things. Some of the things I look at when I'm buying things from my own account. So now we go. I'm going to switch back to these big projects that I do in partnership with others. They're usually structured in the following way, which again, I think if you didn't know this, you just sat down and you came up with something that seemed fair, I think you'd come up with something like this. Usually, if I put up money for a development for another developer doing the development, I'm a limited partner, I put up X dollars. I don't guarantee anything. In 100% of the cases when I invest with others, I don't even want to know how to spell the word personal guarantee. I want to write a check, and that is the degree of my investment. And if the project is not doing well, and somebody is required to put up more money to keep things going, the legal papers that I will sign, the documents I sign, typically say that I'm not required to put in more money. That's at my option, and if I don't, I suffer significant pain, you know, because somebody has got to put it in for me, and if they do, I should suffer significant pain. Either I pay a high interest rate on the loan that they might make on my behalf, or they put in money and I get diluted way down in terms of my ownership. And I'm okay with that, because if the partnership needs to continue and I'm unwilling to put in money, I want to have the right not to put in money. I don't want the obligation to put in more money. I want to know that I can draw a fence around the money that I invest, and if everything goes to hell, and we hit hit this big recession, and we make an apartment building, and nobody wants to rent an apartment, that I can walk away, and I lose all the money I invested, or 90% of it. I basically lose my money, and I go home and cry a little bit. But that's all, and the bank or nobody else is going to come after me for more. That to me is fundamental. I've seen more people who who fall in love with a project and delude themselves into thinking that this thing can't fail, and everything can fail, you know. And then they sign for, you know, guaranteeing bank loans and all kinds of other things, and you know, and then the world as they know it comes to a screeching halt. And so I never do that. I don't want to know how to spell that term, personal guarantee. So normally I put in my money. I don't guarantee that I'll pay any more. I get interest on my money in effect until it's repaid in the form of a preferred return, as it's called. And that preferred return can vary depending on a lot of factors. But you know, typically these days it's, I would say the range, it's a big range, 7 to 12% depending on some factors. So that accrues, but of course is only paid, it's paid by the project if the project has the money to pay someday. And so there's a waterfall. As payments get made, there's an order of payment, and the first payment is typically obvious. The bank gets paid first, but after expenses have been paid by the project, then I get as the investor interest on my money in the form of preferred return. Then the remainder, if there's a positive cash flow, is shared with the, let's call it, with the developer in some proportion. Sometimes 100% of it goes to repayment of my capital. Sometimes 50% of it goes to repayment of my capital, and the remainder is shared under ownership lines in the partnership. That's kind of a negotiation, and you know, just depends on a lot of things. You know, it used to be that I didn't think the preferred return, the interest rate I got on my money, was all that important. I mean, when you looked at the economics look beautiful. You look at their income projections, and you make a ton of, you know, these projects, some of them make a lot of money, and the preferred return wasn't that big a component. And I used to think it didn't make much difference. But what I found was that that's true if everything goes well. If everything goes well and the project does well and it makes a lot of money, theoretically the amount you make on the project in total, the interest on your money is a relatively small component. But that doesn't always happen. Things don't always go according to plan. So for example, with some other folks, we own some land, a big chunk of land in West Broward, 32 acres, I think it is. One of the largest pieces of undeveloped, you know, property in the county. But we've owned it for 13 years and haven't been able to develop it for a whole variety of reasons. The reasons don't matter, but the fact is, the deal we made back then, I have a relatively low preferred return, relatively low interest on my money. So I've had to hold it for 13 years, and the interest I'm going to ultimately get, hopefully, when the property's sold or it's developed or whatever, all of a sudden that's a significant amount. Had the preferred return been higher, I would have gotten us substantially more money. So the preferred return really makes a difference when things don't go don't go well. So I think, you know, I think I've kind of, have I spoken enough? Am I done? I want to leave time for any questions you might have. I've covered all the things I wanted to cover. Again, I go back to this. I believe if you would be taking this course if you weren't interested in real estate, I think it's a fun business. You know, I think it's probably the one I enjoyed the most over I've done a lot of things in my career. I think it's the one I enjoy the most. Now again, I've always been interested in, you know, in real estate and in architecture and that sort of thing. So maybe that's why it's of a greater interest to me. But I find it to be creative and interesting. It's intellectually stimulating in terms of trying to figure out the best way to do something. And, there's always something new every day. There's no dull moment. But I believe what I like about it is I know that I'm not going to always make great decisions. I'm going to screw up. Everybody screws up. Nobody bats 1,000. And I believe this relatively simple chart tells me that if I don't screw up too badly, and if I don't over-leverage myself, which again, I know is real easy to say if you got capital, but if you don't have capital, well, if you don't have the money, you got to borrow the money, so how do so I recognize that. I'm not sure how to fix that issue, but if you don't over-leverage yourself too much, and if the future, or if the past is a reasonable indication of the future, who knows whether it will be, time has a way of bailing you out of your biggest mistakes. Plus, these areas here, if you've got capital, are great opportunities, in a lot of different ways. So keeping powder dry, waiting for these opportunities, I think is an important thing too. So, I think I've talked enough. Yes, sir.
If you are not over leveraged and you do have capital, why someone would be worried about when things go south and you should be worried to sell quick?
Ask me that again. I'm not sure I understand your question.
If you are not over leveraged,
yes,
and you do have capital, why would someone should be worried to sell quick when things
sell quick?
Why should someone be worried to sell,
sell
in a panic? And
you don't. You don't. I agree with that. You don't. I'm not over leveraged, and so when things go bad, I don't sell in a panic. Sometimes I sell because, we sell most of the time with the stuff I've done with Styles, we've held almost nothing. All the buildings that we've built downtown, we've sold them all. And why? Because, the opportunity's there, and somebody's willing to pay more than they're pay enough, it's not worth our holding on to it, And you never go broke taking a profit, and, if somebody's willing to pay, I'm willing to accept it in many cases. But there's some things I've owned since the 1970s. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned that you've held the land for 13 years or so, right? The 30 acres.
Yes.
Then is that your preferred return? Do you have like an aggregation clause in there over the period?
It accrues.
Okay, so it is an accrued.
Oh yes. Okay. Well, we've been paid some of it because there was some refinancings that were done, and other things that generated some cash that paid a little of it. But I don't recall sitting here how much. But a great deal of it is still outstanding, and hopefully someday the project will have the money to pay it if we sell the land or develop it or sell chunks of it or something.
So is the accrual compounding?
Sometimes the preferred return compounds. That one does not. It's just simple interest.
Okay.
I happen to know that. I regret it. Yes, ma'am.
Can you share the story of the Casablanca Cafe?
Oh, you like that story?
Of course.
I'll tell it quick. So I own the property that houses the Casablanca Cafe on the beach. You know?
I go there for happy hour all the time.
Oh, that's music to my ears. Because that tenant that's there, who's been there for 25 years, I've owned that since it's one of the first things I ever did. I had my office there. It wasn't legal, but back then I didn't care. I didn't care. But I had my office there, and then I kept it all these years from the 70s. And the guy that owns the business, the Casablanca Cafe, he leased it 25 years ago this year. And so I bought that. I don't mind telling what's the difference. I bought that property for $95,000. Now, that's what it was worth. It's not as though I, robbed anybody. That's what it was worth. That was back in the 1970s where $95,000 was a lot of money. And there wasn't a home in Broward County that sold for $1 million in 1970, whatever it was. So, I mean, it's a different time. But $95,000 was still $95,000, and the beach was basically a slum. It was just mom and pops. There was no Ritz-Carlton or any of that stuff. Everything looked like the Elbow Room. Some people might say it was better then, but anyway, it was a much different place. So I bought it for $95,000, and it was a religious commune. When I went to look at it, there were a bunch of people, young people living in there with mattresses all over the floors and religious things sprayed on the walls. And so I bought it, and I turned it into my office. And then, in those days, A1A went parallel all the way up the beach. And if as you're coming south on A1A, right by the Casablanca Cafe, it turns a little to the west. So when whoever it was that did the land, the government, let's call it that. The government came in, they wanted, because they had to go through my front yard. So they made me an offer, which I promptly accepted, of $90,000 for that postage stamp of a front yard that they took. So then I had $5,000 invested in that property, and it went into disrepair over time after my office moved out, and a bunch of things happened. And then this guy rented it, and he did all the renovation of it and everything, and he pays me a ridiculous amount of rent every year on essentially a $5,000 investment. Yeah, that was that. But it's like my dad, who unfortunately is not with us anymore. He used to always tell me about all the stocks that he made. I made so much money on this stock, and everyone knew it was really. He loved to play the stock market. Never talked about the losers, He was a wonderful guy, but he only talked about the winners. Never talked about the losers. So that one's a winner, but I've had my losers too. Nobody bats 1,000, including me. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So what would you look for in terms of a young developer as an investor?
Wow. Well, it's if I got to know the person, somebody who's got a great work ethic. I just think in any business, there's no substitute for hard work. I did a lot of things wrong during my career. I still do, but the one thing I think I did right, that I can honestly say without sounding too like I'm bragging too much, is that I worked my butt off. I still work hard. I work every day. I wouldn't know what to do with myself if I didn't. And so hard work is most important. Somebody who thinks pragmatically, and that's kind of hard to define. A lot of people can talk the talk, but they don't necessarily walk the walk, And that's kind of I know that's nebulous, I don't know how else to put it. To me, those are the most important things. People, as I said, Terry Stiles and I were partners for many years, and some other guys of our era. And, as we got older, they retire, they get a little lazy, and so, a few years ago, I kind of found some new horses to ride that were a little younger, people that I could work with that are a little younger, so I have a group of younger. I take some groups out skiing, I like to ski in Colorado, so I take some groups out skiing, and that group of younger guys I call the kids, Take the kids skiing, because to me they are, compared to me they are kids. But these guys they're not kids anymore. They're getting older too, because time goes by. But I don't. It's hard to define, It's kind of like the Supreme Court justice said, when asked to define porn, he said he couldn't define it, but he knows it when he sees it. Are forget which Supreme Court justice said that, but I give him credit. And I think it's somewhat the same thing. How do you evaluate a person? I think you kind of get to know them, and you want somebody who's honest. You know, I do a class with Dr. Tom Two Roger, on my old company. There's a case study on my old company that we do now and then. And I tell those classes that it's trite and it's such an abused thing, but you know, people will tell you, if you don't have your integrity, you've got nothing. Well, it might be trite, but it's the truth. Tell people you're going to do something. You know, don't do it 3 days late. Don't make them call you and ask you, I thought you were going to do this by Friday. Do it by Friday or die trying, and if you can't, you call them on the phone, you tell them, look, I know I promised it to you for today, but a few things happen, I promise I'll have it by X. Be somebody of your word. That's one thing about Terry Stiles. He was a man of his word. I worked with him for, I don't know, 25 years, whatever it was. He never made a promise to me he didn't keep or bust his butt trying, you know? And that's why I worked with him for 25 years. So whether it's a younger person, an older person, younger people, including me, I would admit, you know, tend to cut corners now and again because you're hungrier, you know? You're hungry and, you know, whatever it is sets in and you cut a corner now and again. I did too. So it's easy for me now, later in life, to say, you know, talk this high-minded stuff. But it really is true. People need to know that you will do what you say you're going to do. And I just can't say it any more than that. And you might as well start practicing that when you're young. Because if you don't, by the time you get older, nobody will believe you. And you'd be surprised what that can cost you. So. Yes, sir?
One more technical question again. When you say that because the projects are getting so large now, that you're coming in on the side of the developer as an investor, are there any advantages to that, or is it just a disadvantage to it?
Well, yeah, there are advantages. Yeah, there are advantages. Let me see, without getting too technical about it. The disadvantage, of course, is that the developer side takes on liability. And as I said, I want to draw a circle or build a fence around my investment. If I lose it, I'll go cry, but you know, I live to fight another day. That to me is important because at my age, in particular, I've made enough money to last my lifetime. Why would I bet the ranch on anything? You know, you got to be a total idiot to do that. And I'm not. Hopefully, I'm not a total idiot. So hopefully, you know, you take on some liability. I take on some liability on that general partner side, and I have to do some things to protect against that and make sure I'm indemnified, and that, you know, so anybody can guarantee something. I'm not going to pick on anybody here, but you know, one of you might guarantee me something, and you've got $6.12 in the bank. Well, you guaranteeing to make me whole doesn't do me much good. The guarantee is very nice, but if there's no teeth behind it or assets behind it, doesn't do me any good. So I've got to protect myself in that way. But the benefits are that the developer usually gets a carried interest for the sweat equity, you know. And on the general partner side, that's usually a negotiating point where I can get a little piece of that. So in addition to my ownership stake, I in a sense get a chunk of their ownership stake, which is kind of nice, helps the return. The other big thing is that I typically get, in terms of my preferred return and other provisions of the agreement, I typically get the exact same provisions applying to my money that I invest that the big institutional investor gets. So that if, whoever it is, if Prudential Insurance, if Prudential puts up $100 million in this huge project, and I put in a small fraction of that, well, my money and theirs is worth the same. money is fungible, so I should get the same, and I do, that they get. And big institutions like that, because they, who they are, and because they're putting in $100 million, they dictate terms that are more stringent typically than the terms that I'm able to get in a smaller deal. So
you take
the
advantage
preferred return is usually a little higher. And the provisions on return of that capital are usually a little bit better. So yeah, there's some benefits.
And that's what it would take for the developer to get you to come in on this side
Right.
instead of the other side.
Right. Well, on the other side is the institution, because so much is needed. Well, we built a lot of those buildings downtown with Styles, and we would split the equity typically between, my company, the Horvitz family, their name is on a building here somewhere, and the Hudson family, who's, I think, on part of this building, who's Wayne Heisinger's brother-in-law. So our three families on several projects split the equity money, and that the gross amount of it was still a lot of money, but little enough that the three of us split three ways we could handle it and feel comfortable having that number of eggs in one basket. But some of these huge projects that are so big that the amount of money is 100 million plus. That takes it to a whole new different league. And because Styles has to put in a chunk of the money, that chunk is bigger than they want to do, so they lay it off on people like Anybody else?
When you discuss leveraging, is there a number overall that you utilize on all of your projects, or is there a specific per the deal where you would actually not over leverage yourself?
Well, what I mean by over leveraging, I mean kind of in total, you know. So if I got a big loan on one property and I got no loan on another, and something goes bad, I kind of look at that from a global point of view. How much debt do I have outstanding? Because the debt, if the terms are right, can help leverage up the return, which is kind of nice. On the other hand, I grew up in an era or in an environment where debt was a bad thing. In my old company, we would have loved to have taken on some debt, but there wasn't a bank. There wasn't a bank in the country that would loan us money initially. And then when the bank, because of the company and who the heck we were, and when the time came that banks were willing to loan us money, we didn't need it anymore. So we built that. I worked at my old company for 23 years, and during that time we never had any debt of any kind. As I say, first we didn't have any debt because nobody loaned money, and then later we didn't have any debt because we didn't need it. The company did well enough to internally generate. So I've kind of got everybody's different. Everybody's attitude toward risk is different. That's why some people, when they've got a lot of money, you'll read about money management. People who've got a lot of money, some are very heavily in the stock market, some are more heavily in bonds because they entail less risk. There's no right or wrong to that. Everybody's attitude toward risk is different. If you grew up in the recession, you're scared to death about losing something, about losing your money, so you're probably very risk averse, and if you can, you stay away from debt. And I'm like that. I keep my debt as low as I think is prudent. And so I'm not debt free, but let's say my overall debt load, from the properties and the projects in which I have investments, the overall debt load or percentage is relatively small because I'm very risk averse, and I can be because I have enough money to do that. It's a little harder when you got less money. You gotta get the money somewhere, so you gotta borrow it. Oh, there's a familiar face too. Been hiding over there.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah.
So I have a question when you're looking at individual assets and just kind of about your process when you look at kind of the macro environment
credit worthiness of the leaseholder and then the individual asset, how do you kind of go back and forth between where we are at a macro standpoint, fundamentally, and just kind of...
Well, it doesn't really matter where we are if you've got a great tenant, right? So if, you know, if IBM or Amazon comes in and wants to lease a building from you, even if the recession is around the corner, they're good to pay the rent. So you really don't worry about that too much. But, you know, you gotta pay a lot more for properties where Amazon or somebody are gonna be a tenant. And I don't have much of that, you know. A lot of stuff are mom and pops that you just take a chance on. How you do that, I don't know. You just kind of, you know, you use your gut, and that's why nobody bats 1,000. You know, sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong. I can probably say that among the most successful things I've done, you know, in terms of the profitability of something I've invested in, were things that I was real nervous about in terms of risk. And some of the worst things I've done, some of the biggest losers, have been things where I thought this checked off all the boxes, and it was a sure thing. I can honestly say, yeah, I like to think I'm right more than I'm wrong, but anybody who tells you they're right all the time, it just doesn't happen. Everybody makes mistakes. This stuff is hard. It was so easy, everybody'd be doing it, and everybody, you know, everybody be very wealthy. It's hard. Business is hard, and not just real estate, all business. I don't care if you're running the local diner down the street or you're running Amazon. It's damn hard. It is. It's all I've ever done, and I enjoy it and everything, but it's really hard. That's probably why I like it so much, because of the challenge, but it's really hard. It really is difficult. That's why you gotta work really hard. You just can't be an avocation. It's gotta be a passion. You gotta really enjoy what you do anyway. I mean, I know you hear that all the time, but you gotta enjoy what you do. Going to work every day and looking at the clock. I did that too, you know, as a young guy. Boy, I hated that. Ooh. I didn't do it for long. But what it told me is, I worked for Ford Motor Company in one of their plants up in Monroe, Michigan. Let me tell you, it didn't tell me what I wanted to do with my life, but it sure told me what I didn't want to do. Let me tell you, I lived with the Cessnulis family in their boarding house in this awful town of Monroe, Michigan on Lake Erie, and worked in the engineering department of this plant where they made bumpers. This was back in the day when you had big chrome bumpers on the front of cars. They made those big chrome bumpers. Oh, I can't tell you how miserable I was, but it's the best thing ever happened to me. The best, because it scared the hell out of me. You know, because at lunch we'd have a half hour off for lunch, and we'd always play gin rummy at lunch with these guys. And I'd look at those guys, and all they could talk about was retirement. You know, and they were in their 40s maybe. And all they could talk about was retirement, and looking at the clock. It scared the hell out of me because I didn't want to be like them. You know, not that I don't mean to sound that in some ways sounds terrible. I don't mean that they're bad people. They're really nice, great people. I just didn't want a business life. I didn't want to be earning money in a way where I looked at the clock all day and I was miserable in what I did, and I couldn't wait for Friday. Well, there's nothing wrong with can't wait till Friday rolls around, but you know what I mean. They were miserable in what they did, but they were trapped, and all they had to look forward to was retirement 20 years down the road. So it scared the hell out of me and made me do, I think, some of the things I did. Yes, sir.
You've probably got some investments, you know, outside of Florida. How would you compare the two? How over the years, how have your investments outside of Florida done compared to Florida, and where do you see Florida going in the future, and how you'll invest related to nationwide?
Well, I like Florida because I don't have a big staff, you know. I have a relatively small staff, so, and when we make a decision on doing something, by and large, it's usually in South Florida, because, you know, I live here, my roots go deep here, I understand it, you know, it's just, so real estate is a local business, everything's local, you know. You can invest on Las Olas and have a wonderful piece of property, you go one block in, it's not the same thing. And so even here, with that little different, that little nuance, imagine trying to do it in other parts of the country.
Sure.
So when I've done that, I've usually done it with a styles-like developer, you know, somebody that either I've gotten to know or somebody else has referred me to, or, you know, I've gotten to know, so that they have that kind of depth of knowledge of the market, you know. But I still think, I'm doing a thing with my daughter. My daughter's an artist, and we're doing a project up in Catskill, New York, where we bought 60,000 square feet of old building. The big building is a little building and a real big one, and the big one is from the mid-1800s, an old mill, 5 floors tall, and they used to make Union Army uniforms in this building. It's that old. And we're renovating it and gonna have artists' studios, like a little office building, but geared toward artists. There's a huge migration to that part of the country for artists. So, and then an event space on the ground floor, some other things. Now, would I do that if it wasn't for my daughter? No. She, you know, she lives up there and she's got a passion, and it's my daughter, and it's great to work with her and all that. But do I think the long-term appreciation in Catskill, New York, which is a pretty little town and everything, but I don't think the long-term appreciation there is what it is here. I think Florida's still on Florida's still on this trajectory. I think the number of people coming to Broward County, good or bad, you know, like it or not, that's a different story. But like it or not, I think people are still migrating to South Florida and will continue to do so for the reasons I mentioned earlier. And when they do, they gotta have places to live, eat, and work. And therefore, I think it makes this real estate to be here to be. I'd rather invest here than any other place that I have some intimate knowledge of. I've had a house in Colorado in Steamboat Springs for many years, and so I know that town, and I bought and sold a couple of things there. But, you know, I just think South Florida has incredibly good attributes that will continue this. Yes?
On your projects now, do you focus on a specific product type only, or do you look at the overall deal structure and you just focus on what the returns are?
More the latter.
Okay.
I haven't done much in industrial.
Okay.
Because again, I look for, to me, location's so important, and you know, some warehouse in the middle of nowhere just doesn't appeal to me. You know, locations are just so important. We've done partners and I have done a self-storage project that's really good near downtown. We just expanded it. Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really neat business and very specialized. I like that. But I've done, you know, a little of everything except not industrial. Although I did do one industrial project, not here, but somewhere else. Anybody else?
Did you participate in the Atlantic Hotel on Colonial Beach with Styles?
No, but they just built that.
They just built it. Yeah.
I think they just built it. But we are doing a hotel.
Yeah.
2 partners, we're doing a hotel up in Tallahassee. It's under construction now. 140 rooms. That's the first hotel I've been involved in. I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be really cool. It's right across from the Florida State University football stadium. Right across the street.
Good location.
Well, I hope so. Well, yeah, but you know, that good location for football weekends, but how many of those are there? You got a lot of other days of the year, so hopefully it'll still fill up. Hopefully. Yes?
Knowing what you know now, and you're in our position, where would you start?
Wow. Well, you know, if your father's Bill Gates, that would be helpful. But if your father's not Bill Gates, if he's Joe Gates, having no relation. I mean, that, you know, that's the issue. I mean, you know, I get up here and I can pontificate about all this, but it's easy for me to say because I got a few bucks in my pocket. But remember, I worked 23 years doing something else to put the bucks in my pocket that allow me to do this stuff. So it's,
let's say you have 100,000. What would you do with it?
And you wanted to put it in real estate?
Yeah.
I would go look for the, you know, I'd do what I do. Just go looking for, just put your nose out there, you know, start sniffing around and find some. Oh, here we go. What was I doing? I would, you know, I would go look for something to buy. Something that you can rent, something that, you know, if you're handy with a set of tools,
Yeah.
you know, something that maybe you fix up, you start small and you try and leverage one into the other, and over time, you know, you're young, you got a lot of years before you get my age, you know, so you got time to build up the, you know, your financial wherewithal to continue to do more, and you know, bank debt is still very much available, and interest rates have actually come down recently again. And I read something just the last couple of days, I forget. It was I forget. Well, it doesn't matter. But the likelihood that interest rates will remain where they are, or maybe even decrease over this year, I think it's pretty likely that the interest rates are going to remain low. So this is a good time. And the prices are high, but you know, there's always an opportunity. You just have to weed it out. I didn't really answer. I answered your question, but I'm not sure how else I can answer.
No, yeah, that's true.
You
That's
know?
good. That's good enough.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Is there a specific type of real estate that you believe bears the less risk?
Ask me again.
Is there a specific type of real estate that you believe bears the less risk?
Well, you know, there tends to be these, you know, over the last several years, multifamily, you know, rental apartments have been all the rage, and you know, that's where all the money has gone, and you know, nobody's built office buildings. Now maybe that's because there's not a demand, and there is a demand for, but that can change, you know. And down here, there's just so much multifamily development. You know, there's got to be some end in sight. I don't know when that is. And I think as, who said it? I forget who said it. Somebody famous said it recently, somebody in the, you know, who's a knowledgeable person. They feel we're a lot closer to the top than we are to the bottom in terms of the economy and prices. So, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know. I think every project and every property is different. You just go out and try and find something that has great attribute, great bones, and for whatever reason, it's available at a price that makes sense. It's just hard for me to say beyond that. Yes, sir.
Are you seeing pre-lease requirements on these projects?
Pre-lease regard from the lenders?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Even on the apartments and the rentals?
No, not really.
But on the office?
On the office, yeah, yeah. We did a few condo, you know, some years ago, and there was a pre-sale, you know, and that's an interesting thing. So you would think way back when people did a lot of condos, and not that much condo development these days, but some years ago, the lenders would require that you had to have a certain number of the condos sold, and sold meaning they signed a contract and they put down, it was 10 10% deposit, I think? 10% of the sale price deposit. This was, some years back. So when we did a condo project, I said I'd participate, but I was afraid, 10%, people might walk away from that if times got bad. So I said, let's require 20%. I'll do it if we require 20%, no exceptions, no, this seems like a really good guy, can we do 15? No, 20%. And then when we get to a certain level of sales, then we get the financing and the project moves forward. And we did that project with a 20%, and we were, I don't remember when we got done, we were like 80% sold. With 20% deposits. Then we went to closing. I couldn't believe how many people walked away, because the times got tough, they walked away from 20% deposits.
Wow.
Yeah, I lost a lot of dough on that, See, when things turn, they really turn, and they turn for the worst. Bad enough that people walk away from 20%, and I don't know what condos were selling, I don't remember what the price of the condos were, but they may have been $300,000 or $400,000 at the time, maybe. So imagine, let's say they're even $300,000, $60,000 people walk away from it. Yeah, I think, how about we end it with this and then we get some pizza, or anybody wants it?
So over the last decade, how hard has it been for you to compete with capital preservation dollars that have come in from, so what I'm saying is, like, I've seen a lot of cap rates down here that don't make sense. I'm from further up north,
Yeah.
right, and central. When I came down here, I saw multifamily cap rates trading, I don't know how people make money on it.
I agree.
What I was educated on is that a lot of the money is literally just for capital preservation purposes.
Yeah.
Turmoil back home, whatever it is. How hard is it for you to compete with that? Because you're actually looking for a return on your money.
Yeah, I just wouldn't buy anything that has those kind of, I agree with you. I still think some of the cap rates are ridiculous. But they're not all that way. You just have to find situations that aren't, I don't get some of this either, and that's why when we built, I've been involved in a bunch of multifamily projects, the last few years, and we always sell them. We've sold every one of them because the institutions and others are paying prices that, to me, make it more worthwhile to sell them than to keep them. Again, it's not rocket science. If somebody is paying you a cap rate of 5, that means they're willing to accept over the long run a 5% return on their investment. I'm not. I'd rather put it in that same amount. For that, I can put it in a tax-free municipal bond that I know if I hold it to maturity, I'm going to get my money back. And even if I make a lower interest rate, it's tax-free, so you factor up the effective return competes. So I don't know why anybody would do that, but it's not mine. I only worry about myself, and I can't worry about others. But I agree with you. I don't understand some of these cap rates where they are either. I don't know. Maybe it's the institutions have so much money they need to deploy, and that's all that's available. That's the going rate, and that's what they've got to do. I don't know. I can't say as I know the answer to that. There's probably people in this room much more knowledgeable about that than me.
Well, what I'm asking is have you seen increased competition from, those kinds of dollars, or no?
Well, I just don't view it as competition. I guess it's because if I ran a fund, or if I ran a company that had a bunch of money to invest, I would view all those as competitors. I don't have to do any of this. I just have to feed my own mouth. I don't have other mouths I got to feed.
Okay.
So if I didn't make another investment, it wouldn't change anything. I'm just trying to invest our family's money in some kind of a prudent way. And if there came a time when prices, cap rates, whatever you want to call it, got so frothy that I just wouldn't buy anything. I'd go read a book somewhere for a while until one of these happened. Assuming I'm still alive, but you know, but it's different with institutions that have a bunch of money, they gotta deploy it. So it's different. I just don't view it as competition, it's just the way the market is, you know. It's no different than the stock market, you know, it got frothy and, you know, ridiculously, you know, it got to a point where it's ridiculous and a lot of people quit investing, you know, waiting for a downturn, you know. So you buy on the dips, you know, and you can somewhat do the same thing here. Again, none of this is really rocket science, it's just maybe the terminology is a little different, but it's all the same stuff. It's common sense, I'm telling you, it's just plain common sense. All right, how about we get some pizza?
Yeah.
All right. When it comes to pizza, no one's got to ask me twice. Yeah. Wow. What do we got here?
Sorry.